All right. Well, hello everyone, and thank you for tuning into today's virtual event, Be Kind to Your Mind, Mental Health in a Pandemic, with our esteemed panelist, Dr. John Walkup, Chair of the Pritzker Department of Psychiatry and Behavioral Health for Ann and Robert H. Lurie Children's Hospital in Chicago, Dan Hostetler, Executive Director of Above and Beyond Family Recovery Center, and Brandon Staglin, President of the leading brain health nonprofit organization, One Mind. We are so glad that you are here. We are also joined today by Susan Noyes, founder and publisher of Make It Better Media Group, and Kristen Neff, guest editor. Susan and Kristen will be introducing the speakers and facilitating the Q&A portion of our presentation. My name is Natasha. I am the marketing manager and virtual events coordinator here at Make It Better Media Group, and I will be the woman behind the curtains helping to moderate today's event. If you have any technical questions, please feel free to reach out to me via the chat button. A few housekeeping points before we begin. After we hear from our speakers, we will have Q&A session. To ask a question, please use the stage chat feature located on the right side of your screen. At the end of the event, we will also have a poll asking for your feedback. And without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Susan to welcome you all and introduce our first speaker.
Thank you so much, Natasha. And thanks to the approximately 300 people from across the country, but particularly in Chicago and the Bay Area, who have joined us today. Mental health during February is always an issue, and during a pandemic like COVID, this couldn't be more timely or more important. And we are honored to have true leaders in research and in funding, and 3 practitioners with deep understanding of what serving, especially youth in the mental health space right now means. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to John T. Walkup, the head of Pritzker Department of Psychiatry and Behavioral Health at the Ann and Robert H. Lurie Children's Hospital in Chicago, and a professor of psychiatry, behavioral science, and director of the Division of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry at the Northwestern University Feinberg School of Medicine. Chicago was very fortunate to lure Dr. Walkup from Cornell University, where he was doing groundbreaking work that has led to a long list of awards that he's earned in the last about 12 years. So, Dr. Walkup, we're very much looking forward to hearing from you.
John, you're on mute.
Thank you. Back on and up to speed and off mute. Susan, thank you very much for the warm introduction. Thank you, Natasha, and look forward to hearing from Dan and Brandon and Kristen as the afternoon progresses here. February is also African American History Month, and I think it's important to highlight again the impact of the pandemic in minority communities, and I'll touch on that in just a second. But I think for most people, I want to provide some reassurance that the vast majority of kids are going to do very well during this pandemic. That said, you know, on average, before the pandemic and even coming through the pandemic, about 20% of kids will have a mental health problem before they graduate from high school. And we know that on average across the United States, only about half of the kids actually get any kind of assessment or treatment. Meaning during the pandemic, half of those kids who get nothing, who have a psychiatric disorder but don't get any evaluation or treatment services, are really going to have a tough time. But it's also important to note that of those kids who do get treatment, even evidence-based psychotherapy treatment, only about 40% of those kids will have a clinically meaningful benefit. So we're good at getting to kids and getting kids started in treatment, including evidence-based treatments, but not every kid responds. And again, that group of kids is going to struggle during the pandemic. And then lastly, well, it may seem like every kid is on medicine nowadays. Only about 20 to 30% of kids with anxiety and depression are actually taking evidence-based medicines for anxiety and depression. And that means that about 70% of kids with anxiety and depression are not getting the evidence-based medicine of choice. Those kids are not going to necessarily do very well during the pandemic. The other thing that's been quite tragic is that those youth who live on the edge, if you will, when they lose housing security or food security or economic security of any type during the pandemic, they're going to really struggle, including those kids who have mental health problems and then face those kinds of big environmental changes. And then the last group that I worry a lot about, in part because I've worked in Native American communities for over 30 years, is because COVID-19 hits elders in our underrepresented communities, minority communities. The elders, particularly in American Indian communities, but I also think in Black and Brown communities, the elders oftentimes hang on to the pillars of culture and language and provide great strength to the younger families within the community. COVID-19 goes after that older population relentlessly. And I think it's important to think about the impact that we are going to have over the next decade or two if we lose large numbers of elders from our minority communities, those people who really provide the structure and support for younger families as they grow and mature over time. So with that, we'll move on to our next speaker. Thank you.
Thank you so much, John. We're so fortunate to have someone who truly is working on the front lines with these issues in a very complicated time. And Dan is someone else. I'm going to introduce Dan Hostetler, who's also very much on the front lines. Dan spent the majority of his professional career in nonprofit leadership, heading up the Southern European Division of International Consulting Group for over a decade. And now he's following his passion of addiction recovery and long-term sustainable healing. He is the executive director of Above and Beyond, a powerful family recovery center in Chicago area. And through the application of meaning-centered therapies and other healing modalities, Dan has helped countless people struggling, learning how to lead healthy, fulfilling lives. He's found the recovery environment to be a dynamic learning experience, and that even with a master's degree, 4 licenses and certificates, nothing could have fully informed him of the powerful education that the recovery environment would provide. It was only through hands-on experience did he find that uncovering one's life purpose and meaning has a profound impact on those in recovery. And Dan, we're looking forward to hearing more about your work. Thank you for being here today. And with that, I'll let Dan take the stage.
Well, thank you, Kristen. It's really an honor to be here. John, what John was just talking about a couple of moments ago, I see happen in our direct experience here. I am in recovery myself, so that's one of the things that brings me here. And I encountered our founder and the visionary who really laid out what our mission is, Brian Cressy, 5 years ago, this last January. And so that's when we opened our doors up. We're a walk-in behavioral outpatient clinic. And we do about 2,000 intakes a year, so we've grown very rapidly. We provide free services. We're about 85% African American. Most of our patients are homeless, formerly incarcerated, veterans, people that have chronically relapsed and are unable to pay for services in other facilities. So we are here to provide the highest level of services available to the people that need them the most. And as regards the pandemic, boy, we were on a crescendo, almost a straight slope up as far as demand for our services were concerned. And when the first proclamation hit, we hit a standstill. I mean, we had a couple of weeks in a row where we had only just a handful of patients, but we kept our doors open. We have a safety protocol that's our medical director is very qualified to make sure that we're safe and so forth. And so as soon as word got on the street, we started getting more and more patients that had been frozen out or quarantined out of shelters. There was a big population that was kind of stuck in between facilities on the street, and we got them during the daytime. We're outpatients, so we opened up early and stayed open late. And a lot of these populations had spent the evenings on the mass transit, on the L, the red line and the blue line, where there was standing room only all night. And we would get them in the next morning. So as you might imagine, they had some very exaggerated reactions to these. We see it written that it's being called a hidden pandemic, and we're waiting for that to hit as soon as this pandemic subsides of a mental health problem. And of course, that gets exacerbated and lived out through substance abuse. So we look at substance abuse or substance use disorder as a reaction to deeper underlying problems. And unfortunately, those deeper underlying problems are going to drive the next pandemic, which we're preparing for right now. So we're seeing a lot more explosiveness. We're a walk-in once again. I think I've said that, but we're seeing a lot of low frustration tolerances. We're seeing exacerbated PTSD and complex trauma reactions. And so we're using our referral partners right now, and we've had to change our programming specifically to deal with trauma. We have about 8 hours of trauma group a week now in order to attune ourselves to the populations that are coming in. So that's what we do. We love what we do. We're in yesterday's Wall Street Journal as one of the best and brightest places to work in the United States. So we're very proud of that in an industry that has one of the highest turnovers because of burnout. We seem to be able to hold on to our staff. And with that, I'm looking forward to hearing from my colleague, Brandon.
Susan, you're muted.
First of all, Dan, congratulations on the call out in the Wall Street Journal yesterday. How timely for this event, and evidence that the expertise we're going to learn from you and everyone else is spot on. And I also like the way Dan started with finding your life's purpose makes such a difference, because I do believe that informs Brandon's story too. So as president of One Mind, Brandon Staglin channels his deep experience in communications advocacy and personal schizophrenia recovery to drive brain health research services and media to heal lives. Brandon also serves on advisory councils for the World Economic Forum, the National Institute of Mental Health, the California Mental Health Services Authority's Help at Hand program, Mind Strong Health, and Stanford University's Prodrome and Early Psychosis Program Network, and more. He's earned many awards too. We're so looking forward to hearing from Brandon. And by the way, what One Mind funds, they have raised millions of dollars to very strategically fund the most impactful brain research programs. So talk about a great calling that's had a great impact.
Thank you so much, Susan, and thank you, John and Dan, for your amazing talks about the work that you do. It's very inspiring. And as you said, Susan, I am particularly inspired by Dan's call out that finding your life's purpose can bring even better mental health as it gives you a sense of meaning in your life. So that's very well said, Dan. So I'm Brandon Staglin. As a schizophrenia survivor and president of One Mind, I stand for healing. I'm living proof that with loving family support, early science-based medical care, and continued community involvement to build a sense of agency and engagement in life, one can recover from even the most debilitating of psychiatric illnesses. Today, I'm grateful to be leading my organization, One Mind, to accelerate brain health for all. Today, I'm going to share with you a little bit about my lived experience with schizophrenia, how that is driving me to help bring science to bear to help people struggling with brain health challenges to build healthier and fuller lives, and a deep dive on a program we're doing to help healthcare workers during the thick of the pandemic with their mental health. When I was diagnosed with schizophrenia in the summer of 1990, it was the scariest and the darkest and the last experience of my life. I was transfixed by the conviction that angels and demons were wrestling for control of my soul at every moment, and that I had to be very careful not to make any slight moral mistake lest I be damned to hell for all eternity. Talk about an illusion of grandeur. The hypervigilance this was provoking in me, the constant trying to stay on edge to avoid this horrible fate, was leading me quickly down the path of despair and exhaustion. And within a few months after my first episode, I was at death's door and seriously considering suicide. What kept me going during those dark moments were two things: curiosity and love. I still vividly remember that evening lying on the lawn of my parents' front yard, looking up at the stars as they came out one by one and considering how I would end my life. And the revelation that flashed for me at that moment that the universe still held endless potential for beautiful discovery, and that I had the power to make those discoveries happen. Since then, well, at that moment, I got up and continued to work my recovery, with my resolve restored. Since then, I've been a vocal proponent of science and its power to help people heal. The other thing that helped me keep going during that dark time was love. My family's support was essential. They had never failed to notice during those dark moments, which I had many of during my first episode of recovery, when I felt so depressed that I thought there was no hope. And they always made sure that I knew that they loved me and how much they cared about my well-being. And even though I couldn't always feel and return that love in the moment, I wanted to feel and return that love. So that drive kept me going to work and fight for my own recovery with my family. I live and work by these values today. Today, I'm grateful to be leading One Mind as a brain health research organization that accelerates collaborative research and advocacy to enable all people facing brain health challenges to build healthy and productive lives. I'd like to give you a deep dive on one of the programs we're funding in support of healthcare workers' mental health during the pandemic. Healthcare workers are right in the thick of the pandemic and face greater stress than for pretty much anyone, given that they need to take care of the health of so many people, especially exacerbated by the pandemic. Their mental health is at risk, as you may have seen in many articles. In July 2020, One Mind launched in partnership with UNC, University of North Carolina, Google X, Harvard University, and Brown University, an app called Heroes Health. This app helps track the mental health of healthcare workers so that they can see how they're doing from day to day and week to week. And their health systems that they work with can also see how they're doing over time. And they can be connected to mental health care as needed in case their mental health is in jeopardy. So far, this app has been rolled out across 8 health systems throughout the United States, and it helped hundreds of healthcare workers to connect to care and averted crises in many of these situations. And the testimonials that have come in for this app have been heartwarming. One client at Indiana University has said, quote, "This is great. I've been using the trial mode app and I'm loving it. I love the reports and seeing how I am different week to week." A primary contact at Appalachian Regional Health has said, "We are reaching people through Heroes Health and I know we wouldn't be contacting otherwise." And also says, quote, "Part of my goal in being involved in this type of study is simply to normalize people talking about their mental health and taking care of it. As an organization in our culture, that's always been a struggle for us. Thank you for everything you and your team are doing. We're so grateful to be a part of Heroes Health." If you know of a healthcare worker who might benefit from the use of Heroes Health or a health system that might benefit from the deployment of it within its network, please let me know. Feel free to contact me at brandon.staglin@onemind.org. That's my email. Or ask any questions you might have about my experience, about Heroes Health, or about One Mind in general during the discussion. Looking forward to it. Thank you.
I believe now it's time for the Q&A, and we hope that the audience is sending in any questions you have, but also just to get things started, Kristen has prepared a couple of questions.
I have, and I have the fortune of having spoken to you about your organizations, and a common theme that I've heard from all of you is the element of agency, of embracing your own agency in recovery. That at some point, I know, Dan, you speak about meaning and purpose. Brandon, you talk about your process of igniting your curiosity and using the fuel of love. And John, you and I spoke about helping kids slowly but surely to feel stronger in facing the emotional challenges they have. That's something that I would love to hear from all of you about how you help someone move toward that sense of agency rather than victimhood or feeling that they're overwhelmed by the challenges of mental health that face them.
That's a great question. May I start?
Sure.
All right, thank you. Excellent question. So in addition to the Heroes Health app that I mentioned, OneMind operates a number of programs to help young people with who are facing the serious mental illness and the challenges that brings to thrive in their lives and avoid the negative outcomes that could otherwise occur. So to help engage young people in the care that our clinics offer throughout California, we work with each young person as a partner, not a patient. We actually call them clients, and we work with them as a partner to understand what they care about, what they want to do in their life, and what their values are. And that really helps them to understand that the clinical team is on their side and is going to help them to get to where they want to be. And that really helps them to stay motivated to keep working for their recovery. I had the privilege to work in 2 of these clinics a couple of years ago during my master's program. And it's just heartwarming to see the commitment that these young people have, as well as the passion the clinicians have to help them for their own recovery. So that basis of looking at each young person as an individual and focusing on their goals and their values, I think is essential for engagement and building a sense of purpose in life for them.
When Brandon, you were talking about your story and about what you do, it's so moving. And I heard a lot of attunement and connection in what you're doing. Even when you began talking about your parents and their love for you, it sounds like what you do is individualize your attunement and your really curiosity about each individual to help draw out of them what their individual gifts are. And that helps them choose their own path. To me, that's what that sounds like. And that's really our secret sauce. It's not really very secret at all, but we believe in connection. We have 23 groups, so we do a lot of groups every single week. We are very fluent in silence. We allow individuals to be able to express themselves and to be heard because they're not used to that. And we have subscribed to Viktor Frankl's logotherapy. That's what we really use. So there is a process that's involved. It is the Third Viennese School of Psychology. So there's a developed system to it. We help draw out of them what their inclinations are, what they seem to be most pleased with doing. And underneath all of this is the value of altruistic giving without any expectation of return. And they find it so rewarding. It's new to them. And out of each individual that comes into our place is a new path. So we have to be able to be attuned to them without any of our own ideas about where they should travel to, or we might give them suggestions or ideas or things that they notice, but it's the connection that they're showing up on our radar and we're showing up on their radar. And it's one of the problems in the pandemic is it's driven everyone into this isolation, this forced isolation. And we're seeing the effects of the lack of connection. It's not the same with Zoom. There are wonderful features to it, and certainly it's a tremendous second when we don't have the face-to-face that we're all used to and that we need. But I think this is also something that parents give their children, and I've already heard John talk quite a bit about this and the importance of it. And I see that there's a question in the Q&A section over here. Parents being able to draw out of their own children what their talents and directions are. So.
Hi. I think it's important to understand that the natural outcome of trauma is recovery. And we as human beings have been doing this forever. And I think, Brandon, you epitomized the pathway from that period of time where you feel victimized by the experience, you're in shock. And then there is a kind of pulling it together where, and I call this kind of survivorship. And then lastly, there's using that traumatic experience as the base upon which you stand to transcend and grow. And I think the important thing about that natural process is it happens among human beings, it happens within families, it happens within communities, unless it is disrupted. And I think as a child psychiatrist, the psychiatric disorders that we see can disrupt that process. It can stall people out in the victim stage. It can stall them out in survivorship and can make it really difficult for them to get to that transcendent experience. So the one thing that I focus on in my care for those people who have been traumatized is I make sure that they get the best treatment possible. They move to a really good treatment outcome for their condition so that they can, through therapy or even on their own or through their family, get to that post-traumatic growth, that heroic place where they are transcendent in part because of the difficult times that they've had in their life.
I love that heroic place. That's a powerful phrase. Susan, go ahead.
Thank you so much. Everything you say generates more questions. I'd like to try to summarize 3 of them that I've seen scroll through here. One is, how do you recognize when your child needs help? Whether it's anxiety or schizophrenia or addiction, what are the cues that should then start really, and then what are the strategies for actually getting them to go seek that help? And then the third, and I think this would be a separate one, is like, what are the strategies for parents who need to take care of themselves as they're also wrestling with the trauma of knowing something's wrong with their child?
So that sounds like that one's headed in my direction. So a couple of things. And I'm going to make this very simple. Family history is your biggest cue. So mom and mom, dad and dad, look at yourselves, right? Look in the mirror and see what runs in your families. And be honest with yourself, because not everybody has sought treatment when they should have. And so look for the big ones: autism, ADHD, anxiety disorders, depression, risk for psychosis, the big 5. They all run in families, and it's very important to know what your family risk is. The next thing that I think is really important is each one of those conditions has a relatively specific age of onset risk. We know about autism before the age of 3. We pick up ADHD between 4 and 7. The anxiety disorders, which is probably the most under-recognized and undertreated condition in all of psychiatry, starts between 6 and 12. Depression is mid-teenage years, and the psychotic disorders start in young adulthood. So if you think about your family history and you know the age of onset, you can begin to look for those signs and symptoms. So for ASD, it's that inability to have a reciprocal relationship with another human being. For ADHD, it's hyperactivity. For anxiety, it's fear and worry, somatic symptoms, difficulty falling asleep because of worry. With depression, it's loss of energy and a change in overall vitality. And with psychosis, it's this withdrawn and kind of different kind of experience, if you will, of reality. And you can kind of tell by looking in that person's eyes that there is something happening kind of deep within the brain that is kind of pulling them away from the reality that we otherwise share. So it shouldn't be hard if you know your family history, you know the age of onset risk, and you know the 1 or 2 symptoms that are indicative of the big 5.
John, thank you for that comprehensive explanation of what to look for in a young person for cues or early warning signs of oncoming serious or or mild to moderate even mental illness. But my experience is primarily focused around the psychotic illnesses, because that's what I've experienced, and that's what I primarily work with in terms of clinical work with our scientists and clinicians that we fund. For psychotic illness, you gave a great summary of what to look for. Additionally, there are two major types of experiences that young people have that are indicative of risk for psychotic onset in a short time. One of those is called unusual thought content. And that means when someone is misapplying what we call salience to their experiences. So it's like, say you're driving down the highway and or say you're watching TV and you see a commercial for a certain kind of cola, and you think, wow, that's profound. That's aimed at me. That's a message just for me from the television. That's an example of unusual thought content. Another example of oncoming of a risk indicator is like paranoia or suspicious thoughts that are not founded in reality. So like if people are concerned that people are talking about them behind their back or persecuting them without letting them know, and that everyone is against them, that could be a sign as well when combined with the other of potential risk for psychosis. And there are many other indicators you can look at biologically, but those are the two that are most widely used in clinical and preclinical settings that I know of.
Wow, this is amazing. And some of the symptoms that you are both talking about, especially in childhood and early childhood, if they're not taken care of, we get the results. We're looking at dissociation as being really extraordinarily high here. Actually, substance use disorder is a type of dissociation, but we end up with all sorts of dissociations, including dissociative identity, where people actually lose periods of time. It's more prevalent in our populations than in the general population, where it's usually considered pretty rare. But we look at substance use disorder as being an indication of a deeper underlying problem. For the people that abuse substances, at least the way that we look at it here, it's an answer. It's a very poor choice of an answer, and of course it brings along with it all kinds of antisocial and illegal activities that are not sustainable, and so they end up in incarceration experiences. But we're looking for the deeper underlying co-occurring disorders, and of course we end up doing referrals because we are not a mental health agency, but we work with many of them, so we do a lot of referrals out. So we're still looking at pathways to help people to uncover who they are. And we found that if we can remove them from this existential vacuum and give them a reason for living, the chances of self-harm decrease, and they actually are able to return to their families and their lives. And of course, there needs to be maintenance with that afterwards. And these are the kind of things that Brandon and John work at as far as long-term strategies are concerned.
You know, the second part of the question was about what can parents do? And probably we're well into the pandemic now, so but it never too late to start some of these healthy habits. But there is nothing more powerful for parents than having a structured daily routine, a wake up time, meal times, exercise times, TV times, whatever, but build that structured daily routine. You can't imagine what's happened to most families in the pandemic as they've lost all structure. And then that loss of structure is really when people begin to feel less well. They have more interpersonal conflict. They have bad eating habits, bad sleeping habits. Things begin to kind of fall apart. And the best way to kind of get on top of that is to get back into a daily routine and really formalize, if you will, kind of how you get up, how you get going, what you do, have some good time boundaries in there. It really offers a sense of security and predictability that kids need to do their best during this time.
I'd like to underline that And John, you hit the nail on the head. It's just as important for our populations and adults as it is for children. But better to get these habits established early so they can have a framework that they can hold on to. But the people that we're getting in here right now have lost all sense of punctuality, of time, of importance of routine. Everything has been disrupted. And what you were just talking about is just crucial.
We actually find that for kids who have problems with naughty behavior, if they have a predictable bedtime, they're less naughty. Go figure.
There is another important question that's just come in, and that is, and I tie it to something else I saw earlier. How do we convince cultures to take mental health as seriously as we should? And I loved thinking about funding mental health workers in particular. So I think of advocacy as one route. I think of donating to the right organizations and then just sharing our own experiences and stories as broadly as we can. But do you have advice around, spreading the good word more widely and changing the culture we live in?
Yes. So thank you. That's an excellent question. It is true that throughout our society, people often don't take mental health as the serious issue that it is, even if they have experience with it in people close to them. People may ignore it or pretend it's not something to deal with. So at One Mind, we operate across a three-pronged strategy to improve brain health across society. We call our strategy science, services, and society. So in the society part, we have two initiatives. One is called One Mind at Work. In that initiative, we partner with organizations across the United States, corporations, nonprofits and so forth, governments, state governments and so forth, to promote mental health best practices and awareness and a culture of acceptance and openness about mental health within their companies. And so far, One Mind at Work has signed on about 80 different companies and partner organizations. And collectively, these subsume about 7 million employees. So about 20 million people, if you include their families, are affected by this work. And we have an annual conference each year, as well as many resources that these organizations and companies can access to understand how and implement how to improve the mental health of their employees, because it is so crucial. The other thing that One Mind does to help improve culture around mental health is our One Mind All Media division. So we produce media that is educational, informative, inspiring with four purposes: to bring hope to the population, to help people understand brain health science and care better, to build a sense of community and belonging, and to help people with practical knowledge they can apply for themselves and their families. And the flagship program we have in this work is called One Mind Brainwaves. It's a webcast that I'm the primary host of. It's a weekly webcast we host on our Facebook channel, and we have featured different experts and even many celebrities to participate in the conversations, with a hopes that more people will watch and learn about mental health and see how normal it is to talk about, because it is such a widespread thing for everyone. We've had celebrities including Jewel, Hunter Hayes, Lori Hernandez, Lindsey Vonn, and Patrick Kennedy, Temple Grandin, major voices in the mental health community. And it's reached over 6 million viewers in its first 8 months alone. We are going to do a survey very soon and make this periodical of our viewers to see how they're actually being influenced by this medium. To see if they do indeed improve their hope, their sense of community, their sense of understanding of science, mental health science and care, and whether it's helping them in practical ways. So I'll check back with me later if you're interested. Check out our website, onemind.org/brainwaves, if you'd like to learn more about brainwaves, or tune in tomorrow for our episode on reducing stigma through storytelling, featuring Zach Burton and Debbie Bisnow of the Manic Monologues stage show. Thanks.
I'm going to ask a question that seems to relate to a few questions coming in about personal connection, personal storytelling. Now, for instance, Dan, I'm assuming that everyone dealing with recovery at this stage is experiencing something very different than they would have 2 years ago or even just a year ago in the time of COVID. People at your clinics, Brandon or John, working with you, so often the way we're connecting is remotely. What are your feelings about those connections, about telehealth and about building community during the pandemic?
I'll speak to our populations, and I won't spend a great deal of time on it because I think they might be a little peculiar. Our populations don't have a real familiarity with telecounseling and telehealth, so we've had to put telephones in their hands. We have had to actually work with them to show them how apps work, hook them up to services that they ordinarily may not have had. We have a lot of paranoia people that will not leave their homes, so we've had to make provisions for them to be able to receive Zoom telephone calls and participate. So habituating them to this new medium and drawing them into it so that they feel comfortable has been peculiar to our populations. And now our individual sessions, about half of what we provide are done through telehealth. So that's been peculiar to our populations.
So we wouldn't survive without telehealth. And so in this pandemic, just to give you a kind of a sense of what we've been able to do, our average number of outpatient visits a year is about 28,000 at Lurie Children's Hospital. This past year in the COVID, we were up to 31,000, and our no-show rate was way down. The families love it. We can do sessions during the day between, we can sandwich a 2-hour school block with a therapy session and another 2-hour school block. So we're seeing kids throughout the day, nights and weekends, simply because telemedicine gets rid of the transportation barrier to get into the office. It has been absolutely amazing to us. Our productivity is much, much higher. That said, as I mentioned before, there's more kids pursuing care now. So our inpatient unit is full. We have waiting lists that are expanding. Kids are often waiting for beds or in the Chicagoland area for those kids who really need acute crisis care. So it's even though we've been able to meet a good chunk of the surge, and telemedicine has been critical to that, it's still a very challenging time. The demand is way, way up for mental health services.
I'm going to ask one question that was asked about 20 minutes ago, early on. Brandon, could you share some of the basic check-in questions from your app so listeners here could implement in our daily life assessment of our own mental health?
Sure. And I want to thank John Bates of the Heroes Health team. He's watching and has just posted for Sharon, who asked that question, a good answer. And referring to his answer in the chat, you see that Heroes Health uses PHQ-9, GAD-7, SAS, and others. These are evidence-based, gold standard assessments for mental health challenges like depression or anxiety and so forth. And they enable the app to gather the data to see whether somebody is indeed at risk for depression or anxiety and so forth. It also asks questions about lifestyle, including sleep. Sleep is extraordinarily important for mental health, as I experience every day. I try to make sure that for my own maintenance of mental health, I get at least 7 hours of sleep a night, and was able to do that last night, I'm happy to say. So feeling chipper today. But during the pandemic, it is hard to maintain, as Dan and John have alluded to, a regular routine, and having unusual a lack of structure in your life. You may be tempted to stay up late or get up late or get up early. And so finding that structure is important to maintain your mental health. I definitely want to second that. So enough sleep is, if you build your schedule around your sleep, then when you prioritize that, you will get the sleep you need to thrive, as it is just as the case for healthcare workers.
You're on mute.
Thank you for pointing that out. I'm not sure I ever heard what parents should do if they think their child needs treatment. They've identified them as having an issue, but there's resistance to that idea. How do parents, encourage their child to go forward?
Oh my goodness. So a couple of things. Again, family history should alert you to what to look for, and then age of onset, looking particularly closely during those ages of onset and ages of onset risk. The second thing is have open discussions with your pediatrician about your family history so that you can have another set of eyes working with you, with your kid, to identify when those symptoms may start. Because oftentimes kids will present with mental health concerns that present as physical concerns. And the pediatrician is the person who, if they know your family history, they can be there for you. Many pediatricians now, and we're really building this out here in the city of Chicago, many pediatricians now are fully informed and ready to do basic mental health care. It's hard to find a child psychiatrist. It's hard to find a good psychologist, but everybody's got a pediatrician. The other thing I say to families is, listen, if you've got an accountant and you maybe have a lawyer and you have a religious leader and you may have all of those, why not have a family mental health professional? I mean, go in, do the family health checkup, let them take a look at everybody, do that family history review with them, and then let them teach you about what to look for over the course of your life. There's nothing better than having someone who knows you and knows your family, so that when problems do develop, you're not starting fresh. You're starting in the context of working with someone you know and trust, and you can be there with that person if times get hard.
Very well said, John. Also, if a young person is experiencing psychosis and has a phenomenon called Endosognosia, which just means that they're sick such that they don't understand that they're sick or can't perceive that, if they're convinced that they are in a state that is different from others but not sick. Delusions may include being a savior of the world, as I kind of thought when I was ill with schizophrenia. If this is the situation, there is a method to deal with that. It's called LEAP, which has been pioneered by Dr. Xavier Amador. LEAP stands for Listen, Empathize, Agree, and Partner. So the idea behind that is that if you listen empathetically to your child, your young person, or whoever your family member is, and let them know you're listening and hearing what they're saying, that means a lot, without trying to prescribe something to them from the get-go. The second thing is empathize. So the empathy is a critical part of the listening. If they know that you're on their side, if they that you feel for them, just as my parents did for me, it helps the bond that you have with that person. So don't judge, empathize. Third part is agree. Agree on what to do next. So find common ground that you may have with that person around maybe understand. First, when you're listening to them and empathizing, you're learning about what they think and how they feel. So build on that to find common ground, to develop a plan to go forward, potentially to see a professional or to take whatever step they're willing to take. And then the partner part, the P, partner, is to help them know that you're with them every step of the way, and you're going to work cooperatively with them to get to the goals that will help them to live the life that they want to live and that is helpful for them and their family and community. So that's the LEAP method and can help.
So interesting. That's a very detailed, specific information that I think all of us, great to have in our back pocket. So thank you for that. Here's a good question. Can you share some insights on those that are thriving in this environment and maybe fear the return of the status quo or going back to a new society? Those introverts, those of us who, are introverts out, resonate. We'd love to hear your thoughts on this.
So one of the okay, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
One of the groups of kids that I've worked very closely are kids who have separation anxiety. And these are kids, and separation anxiety starts between 6 and 9 years of age. Sometimes kids have symptoms before that, but they really worry that something bad will happen to them or something bad will happen to their parent if they're separated. These kids, forgive me, are in hog heaven now because they don't leave their parents' side all day long. These kids really struggle during normal times. They struggle going to bed alone. They sometimes struggle even being in a different room in the house from their parent. That even that modicum amount of separation is tough for them. So those kids at that moment are right now are loving being at home, and they are going to have a lot of trouble getting back to school. The other group of kids that are thriving now are kids with social anxiety. These are kids who are really uncomfortable mixing it up, joining peer groups, going out. They love the isolation because their social anxiety is not triggered, if you will, because they're at home. Those two groups of kids, particularly the anxiety disorders in general, but those two groups of kids are going to have more trouble. What is interesting though is I have a number of those kids who are treated and are doing well, and so they are in recovery from their anxiety disorders. They can hardly wait to get back to school. So there is something about those conditions that aren't permanent. If they get treated, those kids can be in really good shape and be ready to return to school when they need to.
That's good. We have populations that naturally isolate anyway. So many of them are also in hog heaven because they're at home. They don't have a lot of the social anxieties that they have when they come into the building and so forth. So we're in the midst of putting together strategies. Probably central to most of our strategies is going to be contingency management. There's a lot of research supporting this, a reward system for them to be able to come in. We have requirements now because we have to do testing. We still have to do a great deal of testing to see what they have in their blood and what they have in their systems and so forth. And we've gone a little bit soft on this because we have very natural transportation problems that happen with our populations. So I wouldn't say that we figured this out at all, but we're in the midst of putting together strategies.
Well, we have, oh yes, Susan, you go ahead. Oh, you're on mute, Susan.
Thank you, Kristen. I can see that we're running out of time, and I just wonder if there's anything else that the three of you just want to share that you think is important.
For me, it's really important that parents don't worry too much. This is a time when there's lots of stuff and a lot of kind of fear mongering in the environment. The vast majority of kids are going to do extremely well. They'll never forget this. This is an extraordinary time, but they are going to come out of this and bounce back and move on. And I think it's important for parents to understand that that is the vast majority of kids. That said, there's that group of kids who have a psychiatric disorder or have an experience during COVID where they lose food, housing, or economic security. Those kids are going to have trouble, and they're going to have trouble responding. But hopefully that's a smaller population of kids, and we will have the kind of services available. The other thing is this is a good time to kind of do that family checkup and take a good look at yourself in the mirror in terms of whether your mental health is where it needs to be and where the mental health is of the other people in your family, and make sure to kind of reach out now. Yes, there are waiting lists and it is difficult to get an appointment, but reach out now and get yourself prepared to take on the mental health challenges if they are there and untreated within your family.
I'd like to add on to, oh, go ahead, Dan.
Well, Brandon, I'm so fascinated with what you've said. Both of you, it's once again such an honor to be here with you both, and I'll be giving you a call. There are too many things that you brought up that are too interesting for me, but I just want to tell anyone who's out there right now and experiencing the scourge of addiction that there's another side to it. We work with a loving model, non-judgmental model, and we have a protocol for it. So we have everything documented, and it is a process that is transferable anyone who has any interest in these things, this is something that we're looking to proliferate across the United States. So it is available. People can get involved in what we're doing. We have a very active volunteer program, and we're supported by donors. Donors are what allow us to be able to provide our services for free. So anyone who has an interest in this, once again, we work very well. We have over 100 linkage agreements with other organizations that we would like to solicit that interest and have you reach out to us.
Thank you, Dan. It's great you have those services available for people who need them. So I'd like to build on what John was saying about that we will get through this. And so I was just watching a TED Talk of Dr. Alia Crum of Stanford University, who talks about the healing power of mindset change. She'll be featured on our Brainwaves webcast next Friday, next week. She talks about something that is very relevant for us today in the pandemic, and that is the ability to perceive things differently, to change how you approach them and what the outcome can be. So if we look at the pandemic as something that is an opportunity, in addition to being a challenge, an opportunity to reset and find a new path forward for our lives, that can frame things in a positive way and help us move forward healthfully. So for example, I'm grateful the pandemic has given me the opportunity to spend more time at home with my family. I love that. I'm getting to know my niece and nephew who live close by. They're in our bubble, spending more quality time with my wife and our dog and a rabbit. Love spending time with my family. And getting to do that has been a blessing that I have been able to experience because of the pandemic. And our bonds are tighter and closer because of it. I feel great about the future because of these things. And the other thing I want to say is that, similar to what Dan was saying, we do operate clinics for young people who are experiencing the early stages of psychotic illness and other serious mental illnesses. We just opened one in Sonoma County. We also have them all across California. If you have a young person or are a young person who might be in need or is seeking help for these early signs of psychosis, feel free to get in touch with me. You can check us out at onemind.org/aspire is the name of that program, and hope that you will get in touch with any help if you need it. Thank you.
You're on mute, Susan.
You must be really tired of having to repeat that. I'm so sorry. Brendan, could you please repeat the name of the TED Talk and the person who's going to be on your podcast one more time, please?
Sure. I can't remember the title of the TED Talk, but the person, and you can Google her name and TED Talk and get it, is Alia Crum, ALIACRUM. She's a assistant professor at Stanford University and has done amazing work in the field of understanding how changing your mind can change your health in so many ways.
I'd also like to point out that this video is going to be online. We will do follow-up articles, at least one, probably more than one, that sort of summarizes the top line advice. And we will encourage everyone to donate and support. What you're doing is so important, and we want to do everything we can to help you grow.
Thank you very much.
So much gratitude for your work, each of you, and your humanity.
Amen. Natasha, you're back.
I'm back. I'm here to wish everyone a great weekend, and we're just so grateful that you were all able to join us. And thanks again to our wonderful panelists and moderators for making this such a special event. And a big thank you to everyone that attended and participated. We would love to stay connected with you. So if you haven't done so already, please subscribe to our Better Letter and follow us on our social media accounts. Like Susan said, I'll be sending out a recording of this event soon, along with a follow-up survey and all the resources you need to stay connected with us. We would also love to hear from you about future ideas or for future events. And we'll include a place for you to share your ideas in the survey. And if you're watching this as a recording on YouTube, please subscribe to our channel. We upload new content regularly. So once again, thank you so much for joining us, and I'm wishing you all a wonderful rest of your week and long weekend.